The cordless phone felt cold against my ear. "Mom," Marcus began, his voice strained, and I knew instantly something was wrong. Sarah was on the line too. I could hear her breathing softly in the background. "We need to talk," he continued. We think it's best if you give us some space." For a while, my breath caught in my throat. I stood in my brightly lit kitchen, the aroma of the roast chicken I'd made for their visit hanging heavy in the air, untouched on the counter. "Space," I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean, space?" Sarah took the phone then, her tone measured. "June," she started, that careful way she always used my first name. "Your constant involvement, it's a bit much. We appreciate everything you've done, but we need to figure things out on our own." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Much," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "What's much? I make you dinner. I help with the house. What am I doing that's so intrusive?" There was a short silence on the other end, a silence that screamed volumes. Then Marcus came back on. "It's just suffocating, Mom. We love you, but we need to breathe." Suffocating. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. I clutched the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. I'd spent the last few months, years even, making sure they were settled, comfortable. I'd helped with the down payment on their house. I cooked them meals every week. I even offered to look after their dog when they went away. And now this. "So you're asking me to stay away?" I asked, my voice trembling. "For how long? A week? A month?" There was another loaded pause. Then Sarah spoke again. "We're not sure, June. We just need time apart. The word sliced through me. "I see," I managed, trying to keep my voice even. "Well, I understand. I didn't. Not at all. But what else could I say? We'll be in touch," Marcus mumbled before they quickly hung up. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing dully. The scent of the roast chicken suddenly turned acrid, a mockery of the welcoming meal I had prepared. I placed the phone back in its cradle, my hands shaking. Suffocating. The word echoed in the silence of my kitchen. Me suffocating. I had poured my life into my children, into making sure they had everything they needed, everything I never had. And now they were pushing me away, telling me I was too much. I wandered into the dining room, the table set for 3, a cheerful yellow tablecloth, and my best china. A wave of nausea washed over me. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool surface of the table. Everything I did, everything I had ever done, was for them. And now this. Slowly, methodically, I began clearing the table, the clatter of the dishes a hollow sound in the empty room, as I scraped the uneaten roast chicken into the garbage disposal. A hard knot began to form in my stomach. It wasn't just hurt. It was something colder, something sharper. Anger. No, not anger. Resolve. I washed the dishes, my movements precise and deliberate, the rhythmic splashing of the water a strange comfort in the quiet house. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply cleaned, the methodical movements a balm to the wry ache in my chest. As I wiped down the counters, I noticed a small stack of papers tucked under a cookbook. It was the paperwork for Marcus's company, the one he'd started a few years ago. He'd been so proud, so independent. "Built it all myself, Mom," he'd boasted. I'd smiled and nodded, proud of his drive and ambition. I picked up the papers, flipping through them idly. Then I stopped. A name jumped out at me, buried deep in the financial statements. My name. A large sum of money, listed as a silent investment. My money. The inheritance from my mother. The money I had quietly invested in Marcus's company without him knowing, wanting to give him a leg up, wanting him to succeed. He had no idea. He thought he'd done it all on his own. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The knot in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a different feeling, something akin to power. Suffocating. Perhaps it was time for Marcus and Sarah to learn exactly what that word meant. The house was quiet, but for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt pregnant with possibility. I had a feeling things were about to get very interesting. The phone clicked dead, a small, sharp sound that echoed the hollowness blooming in my chest. Sarah's words, suffocating, constant break, swirled in my mind, a bitter cocktail of rejection. I stood in my kitchen, the cheery yellow walls suddenly mocking my despair. The casserole I'd spent all afternoon preparing, Marcus's favorite, sat cooling on the counter, a monument to wasted effort. My hands, usually busy chopping vegetables, kneading dough, folding laundry, all for them now trembled uselessly at my sides. What was I supposed to do with them now? Who was I supposed to nurture, to care for, if not my own children? A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the edge of the counter for support. My legs felt weak, my breath shallow. I sank into a chair, the familiar solidity of a small comfort in this swirling sea of hurt. The silence of the house pressed in on me, amplifying the emptiness. This was the house I'd filled with laughter, with the aroma of freshly baked cookies, with the constant chatter of family life. Now it felt like a mausoleum. A choked sob escaped my lips. I wasn't just hurt. I felt like a failure. My entire life had revolved around my children. From the sleepless nights of their infancy to the anxious days of their teenage years, I'd poured every ounce of my energy into their well-being. I'd driven them to countless soccer practices, helped them with their homework, nursed them through chickenpox and heartbreak. I'd celebrated their triumphs and consoled them in their defeats. And for what? To be told I was suffocating them, that they needed a break from me, from my love. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Love. Was that what it was? Or was it something else? Dependence. Control. Had I, in my desire to be a good mother, become something monstrous? The thought chilled me to the bone. Had I unknowingly built a cage around my children, disguised as a loving home? I looked around the kitchen, at the family photos adorning the walls. Marcus as a toddler, grinning mischievously, covered in chocolate cake. Sarah, her eyes shining with pride, holding up her first-place science fair ribbon. Moments frozen in time, seemingly full of warmth and happiness. But now, those images felt tainted, distorted by the harsh reality of Sarah's words. "You're suffocating us, Mom." The words echoed in my head, a relentless hammer blow against my fragile self-worth. What had I done wrong? Where had I gone astray? I had always believed that a mother's love was unconditional, a constant source of strength and support for her children. But now, it seemed that my love was not a gift, but a burden. I stood up, my legs still shaky, and walked over to the sink. I turned on the faucet. The rush of water a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my mind. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the tears, the hurt, the confusion. I looked at my reflection in the window above the sink. A tired, middle-aged woman stared back at me, her eyes red-rimmed, her face etched with pain. Was this the face of a monster? A sudden thought pierced through my despair. Marcus's company, the tech startup he'd launched a few years ago. He'd been so proud, so confident, telling me about his innovative ideas, his ambitious plans. He'd downplayed my offer of financial assistance, insisting he wanted to do it on his own. "I need to prove myself, Mom," he'd said. "I need to build something of my own." I'd respected his desire for independence, but I'd also known the realities of the startup world. I'd quietly invested a significant sum in his company through a third party, ensuring he wouldn't know it was me. I hadn't done it for control or for recognition. I'd done it because I believed in him, because I wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to have the chance to build his dream, to prove himself, not just to the world, but to himself. Now, as I stood there, the cold water dripping from my face, a flicker of something ignited within me, not anger, not resentment, but something akin to resolve. Perhaps I hadn't been entirely honest with myself. Perhaps, beneath the layers of maternal love, there had been a sliver of self-doubt, a need to feel needed, to feel valuable. And perhaps, just perhaps, this painful rejection was the catalyst I needed to rediscover my own worth. Independent of my children, I turned off the faucet and dried my face with a dish towel. The silence of the house no longer felt oppressive. It felt expectant, as if something was about to shift, to change. I looked at the casserole on the counter, Marcus's favorite. I picked it up and carried it to the refrigerator. I'd save it for another day, a day when perhaps, just perhaps, things would be different. A day when I would no longer be defined by my role as a mother, but by the woman I was, and the woman I was yet to become. The faintest hint of a smile touched my lips. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The silence of my own house pressed in, heavy and suffocating, just like Sarah had said. "We need a break, Joan. You're suffocating us." Her words echoed in the stillness of the morning after their call. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the darkness swirling inside me. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the familiar ritual feeling strangely hollow. It was a beautiful day outside, birds chirping, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the oak tree in my backyard. But none of it registered. All I could see was the reflection of my own tired face in the dark surface of the coffee. Suffocating, I whispered, the word bitter on my tongue. Had I really become that? The thought twisted in my gut, a knot of shame and regret tightening with each passing moment. I wandered into the living room, aimlessly picking up a framed photo of Marcus as a child, his gap-toothed grin radiating pure joy. He'd always been such a happy, energetic boy, full of dreams and mischief. When had that changed? When had the bright spark in his eyes dulled, replaced by a weary resignation whenever I called Mom? "I'm busy," he'd say, his voice strained. Or, "Can I call you back later?" The later rarely came. I sank onto the sofa, the plush cushions offering no comfort. I'd always prided myself on being a good mother. I'd dedicated my life to Marcus, pouring all my love and energy into ensuring he had every opportunity, every advantage. I'd worked tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs to make ends meet after his father left, determined to give him the life he deserved. I'd been there for every school play, every soccer game, every scraped knee and broken heart. I'd thought I was being supportive, loving, present. "You're always there, Mom," Marcus had said once, not unkindly, but the underlying message was clear. Too much, too present, too suffocating. A wave of nausea washed over me. Had I done it all wrong? Had my love, my dedication, inadvertently pushed him away? The thought was unbearable. I'd given him everything, everything. My hand trembled as I reached for the remote, flicking through the channels, the images blurring into a meaningless stream of light and sound. Nothing held my attention. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every interaction, searching for the moment where things had gone so wrong. Had it been when he went away to college? When he met Sarah? Sarah, she was a lovely girl, intelligent, ambitious, kind. But there was a distance in her eyes, a subtle coolness that I'd never been able to penetrate. I remembered the first time they'd come to visit after announcing their engagement. I'd been so excited, so eager to welcome her into the family. I'd spent days preparing, cooking all of Marcus's favorite dishes, decorating the house, wanting everything to be perfect. "Sarah, darling, I'm so happy to finally meet you," I gushed, embracing her warmly. She'd smiled politely, but her eyes hadn't quite met mine. "It's nice to meet you too, June," she'd replied, her voice reserved. The visit had been strained. Every attempt I'd made at conversation, every question about their plans, every offer of help, had been met with polite deflection. "We're still figuring things out, June," Sarah had said, a tight smile on her lips. "We appreciate the offer, but we want to do this on our own, on their own." The words had stung, a subtle but unmistakable rejection. I closed my eyes, the memories swirling like a bitter cocktail. The lavish wedding I'd insisted on paying for, despite their protests. The down payment on their first house, a gift I'd thought would be appreciated. The constant calls, the texts, the care packages filled with homemade cookies and his favorite snacks. Each act of love, each gesture of support, now seemed like another brick in the wall I'd unknowingly built between us. "I just wanted to help," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I'd wanted to be involved, to be a part of their lives. But somewhere along the way, my desire to help had morphed into something else, something stifling, something suffocating. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't been a loving mother. I'd been a burden, a weight dragging them down. The shame was overwhelming. I buried my face in my hands, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. The phone rang, jarring me from my reverie. It was my financial advisor, Mr. Henderson. "June, I just wanted to update you on your portfolio," he began, his voice brisk and professional. "The investment you made in Patterson Technologies is performing exceptionally well. In fact, it's exceeded all expectations. Patterson Technologies, Marcus's company, The company I'd secretly invested in years ago, a silent partner providing the crucial seed money that had allowed it to flourish. He didn't know, no one knew. A flicker of something cold and hard ignited within me. Not revenge, not exactly, but something akin to it. A sense of power, a reclaiming of control in a world that had suddenly spun out of my grasp. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady. "I appreciate the update." I hung up the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. The silence in the house no longer felt oppressive. It felt expectant, like the quiet before a storm. The silence in the kitchen was thick enough to choke on. I'd made a pot of tea, my usual Earl Grey, but it sat untouched, the steam curling into the still air like a mournful sigh. Marcus and Sarah's words echoed in my ears. Suffocating distance break. I glanced at the calendar, the brightly colored squares mocking me with their promise of future family gatherings that would now likely never happen. I couldn't stay here, trapped in this house, suffocated by the weight of their rejection. I needed air, space, anything to escape this crushing feeling of failure. "I'm going for a drive," I muttered to the empty room, grabbing my keys from the hook by the door. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as I pulled out of the driveway. I drove without a destination, letting the familiar streets guide me. I passed the park where I used to push Marcus on the swings, the library where we spent countless afternoons lost in books, the ice cream shop where we celebrated every little victory. Each landmark was a painful reminder of a past that felt irrevocably broken. How could they think I was suffocating them? I whispered, my voice cracking. All I ever wanted was to be a part of their lives. I ended up at the waterfront, the vast expanse of water a stark contrast to the constricting feeling in my chest. The waves crashed against the rocks, a rhythmic pulse against the silence in my car. I watched the seagulls swoop and dive, their cries echoing across the water. They seemed so free, so unburdened. "I wish I could just fly away," I said, the words barely a breath. I spent what felt like hours just sitting there, lost in my thoughts. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The beauty of it felt jarring, a cruel reminder of the joy I was no longer capable of feeling. As darkness crept in, a chilling realization settled upon me. Had I been a bad mother, had my love, my constant presence, been misconstrued as something negative? "Maybe they're right," I said aloud, the words heavy with self-doubt. Maybe I did smother them. The thought stung, a sharp, piercing pain that settled deep in my gut. I had always prided myself on being a good mother. I had dedicated my life to Marcus, sacrificing my own dreams and aspiration to ensure his happiness and success. And now this rejection, this accusation of being a burden. It felt like a betrayal of everything I had ever done. What did I do wrong? I asked the empty car, my voice choked with emotion. I started the engine, the rumble a small comfort in the growing darkness. As I pulled away from the waterfront, I noticed a familiar building looming in the distance. It was the headquarters of Patterson Technologies, Marcus's company. A strange impulse led me closer. I parked across the street and stared at the illuminated windows, each one a testament to Marcus's success. He had built this company from the ground up, or so everyone thought. A flicker of memory surfaced, A conversation I'd had with Marcus years ago when he was struggling to secure funding for his startup. He had confided in me, his voice filled with desperation, about the possibility of losing everything. I had offered to help, quietly investing a significant portion of my inheritance, a fact I had never revealed to anyone, not even Marcus. He thinks he did this all on his own, I murmured, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. Inside, I kept records of all my investments, including the one in Patterson Technologies. The numbers stared back at me, a stark reminder of the silent role I had played in Marcus's success. A slow, almost imperceptible smile spread across my face. It wasn't revenge I was after, not in the traditional sense, but a quiet sense of power began to bloom within me, a sense of self-worth that had been dormant for far too long. I closed the notebook and placed it back in the glove compartment. I knew deep down that things were about to change. I didn't know how, not yet, but I felt a shift within me, a quiet resolve that had nothing to do with Marcus or Sarah, and everything to do with reclaiming my own life. The drive home felt different. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was the quiet before the storm. The crisp Seattle air whipped around me as I found myself, almost without realizing it, walking towards the gleaming glass tower of Davidson and Associates. It was a strange pull, an unconscious magnetism drawing me towards the epicenter of Marcus's life, the life he'd so carefully constructed away from me. Just a week ago, he and Sarah had sat across from me at the dining room table, their words like shards of ice piercing the carefully constructed illusion of our family. "Mom," Marcus had said, his voice strained, "we need some space. Your constant involvement suffocating." Sarah, ever the quiet observer, had simply nodded, her eyes fixed on the floral centerpiece as if it held the secrets of the universe. Now, their words echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of my apparent failure as a mother. I paused across the street, the afternoon sun reflecting off the building's surface, momentarily blinding me. It was an imposing structure, a symbol of success and ambition, and I, apparently, was the unwelcome shadow lurking on the periphery. Pathetic, I muttered to myself, the word hanging in the air like a bitter taste. What was I doing here? This wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to magically erase the hurt, the rejection. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to turn away. Something kept me rooted to the spot, a strange, almost defiant curiosity. I watched as people bustled in and out of the revolving doors, each one absorbed in their own world, their own agendas. Were they all as successful as Marcus? Did they all have mothers who were deemed suffocating? The thought stung, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over me. Impulsively, I crossed the street, the traffic a blur of sound and motion. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I certainly wasn't going to walk into the building and confront Marcus. That would only confirm their accusations, solidify their perception of me as an intrusive, overbearing mother. Instead, I found myself drawn to a small coffee shop nestled at the base of the tower. It was a sleek, modern space, all polished chrome and minimalist decor. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee hung in the air, a comforting contrast to the sterile atmosphere of the office building. I ordered a latte, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my wallet. As I paid, my gaze drifted towards a framed article on the wall, a feature on Davidson and Associates. It highlighted the company's rapid growth and innovative approach to financial consulting, praising Marcus's leadership and vision. I felt a flicker of pride, a bittersweet reminder of the boy he had been, the dreams he had shared with me. But the pride was quickly overshadowed by a deeper, more complex emotion. Resentment, perhaps. Or maybe it was something closer to understanding. I took my latte and found a seat by the window, my eyes still fixed on the article. It mentioned the company's key investors, highlighting their contributions to its success. And then I saw it. A name tucked away in the final paragraph, almost an afterthought. Seed funding provided by an anonymous private investor. Anonymous. I knew who that anonymous investor was. It was me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. All these years, I had quietly supported Marcus's ambitions, funneling a significant portion of my inheritance into his venture. He had no idea. He had attributed his success solely to his own hard work and ingenuity, oblivious to the safety net I had carefully woven beneath him. And now he was pushing me away, discarding me like an unwanted piece of baggage. The irony wasn't lost on me. He wanted independence, freedom from my influence. Yet, his independence was built on my support, on the very resources he was now using to distance himself from me. A slow, steady burn of anger began to replace the humiliation, the hurt. It wasn't a fiery rage, but a quiet, simmering resentment. I had been foolish, naive. I had allowed myself to be relegated to the sidelines, to be perceived as a burden rather than the silent architect of his success. I sipped my latte, the warmth spreading through me, a strange sense of calm settling over my anger. This wasn't about revenge, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't about hurting Marcus or making him suffer. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about reasserting my value, not just as a mother, but as an individual. He wanted space, fine. He could have his space, but he would have it on my terms. I watched the flow of people entering and leaving the building, each one a small piece in the intricate puzzle of Marcus's world. And I knew, with a certainty that surprised even me, that I held the key to that puzzle. I had the power to reshape the landscape, to redefine the rules of engagement. He wanted independence. He would get it, but he would also learn the true meaning of interdependence, the delicate balance of power that had existed between us all along, a balance he had so carelessly disrupted. Finishing my latte, I stood up, a new sense of purpose coursing through me. I walked out of the coffee shop, the afternoon sun warm on my face, the city noise fading into a gentle hum. I didn't look back at the towering glass structure, at the symbol of Marcus's carefully constructed world. I didn't need to. I knew what I had to do. I knew how to reclaim my power, how to rewrite the story of our relationship. And it started with a simple phone call. "Hello, David," I said, my voice steady and clear. "It's June Patterson. We need to talk." The sleek, cool lobby of Davidson and Associates felt like a world away from the suffocating label Sarah had pinned on me. Overbearing, Julian had echoed, his eyes avoiding mine. The memory stung, but a new resolve steadied me. I wasn't here to confront them, Not today. Today was about observation. Today was about understanding the life they had built, a life I had unknowingly financed. The receptionist looked up, her smile practiced. May I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Patterson, I said, my voice calm and even. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a subtle shift in her posture. Do you have an appointment? She asked, her tone slightly more formal. No, I don't, I replied, meeting her gaze directly. I'm his mother. The name seemed to carry weight here. The hesitation was barely perceptible, but it was there. One moment, she murmured, picking up the phone. I took a seat in one of the plush leather chairs, the silence broken only by the muted ringing of the phone and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I watched the people coming and going, the purposeful strides, the briefcases clutched tightly, the hushed conversations. This was Marcus's world, a world I had enabled, yet been excluded from. Mr. Patterson is in a meeting, the receptionist said, her voice apologetic. Would you like to leave a message? No, thank you, I replied, standing up. I'll just wait. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't argue. I walked over to the large windows overlooking the city, the sprawling landscape a stark contrast to the sterile elegance of the lobby. From this vantage point, I could see the bustling streets below, the tiny cars moving like ants. I felt a strange detachment, as though watching a play unfold beneath me. I hadn't told Marcus I was coming. Part of me wanted to surprise him. Another part of me simply wanted to observe him in his element. I wanted to see the man he had become, the successful entrepreneur, the husband. I wanted to understand how he could so easily dismiss me, the woman who had sacrificed so much for him. As I stood there, lost in thought, a familiar figure emerged from one of the meeting rooms. It was Marcus. He was laughing, his arm on the shoulder of a man I recognized as one of the senior partners. He looked confident, assured, a far cry from the anxious young boy I remembered. He hadn't seen me yet. I watched as he continued to talk to the partner, his gestures animated, his voice filled with enthusiasm. A sudden urge came over me to leave, to disappear back into the anonymity of the city. But something held me back, a need to be seen, not just as his mother, but as something more. I took a deep breath and walked towards him. Marcus, I said, my voice soft but firm. He turned, his smile fading as he saw me. Mother, he said, his voice tinged with surprise, perhaps even a touch of annoyance. What are you doing here? Just thought I'd drop by, I said, my smile unwavering. See how you're doing. The partner, a tall man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, looked at me with curiosity. Marcus, you didn't tell me your mother was visiting, he said, his voice smooth and professional. It was a surprise. Marcus stammered, his cheeks flushing slightly. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Patterson, the partner said, extending his hand. I'm Richard Davidson, a senior partner here. It's nice to meet you too, Mr. Davidson, I replied, shaking his hand. My grip was firm, my smile genuine. I've heard so much about you. All good, I hope, he chuckled. Indeed, I said, my gaze shifting back to Marcus. I'm incredibly proud of the work Marcus has done here. A flicker of unease crossed Marcus's face. He glanced nervously at Mr. Davidson, who seemed oblivious to the subtle tension between us. "Mother, I have a meeting in a few minutes," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Of course, dear," I replied, my smile softening. "I won't keep you, Mr. Davidson. It was a pleasure meeting you." "The pleasure was all mine, Mrs. Patterson," he said, his smile unwavering. "Perhaps we can chat again sometime. I'm always interested in hearing from our key stakeholders." He emphasized the last two words, his eyes twinkling with a knowing glint. Marcus's face paled. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, unspoken questions hanging in the air. As I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about reclaiming my place, not just as a mother, but as someone whose presence, whose contribution, could no longer be ignored. The city seemed to shimmer around me, a landscape of possibilities. I knew this was just the beginning. Mr. Davidson's words echoed in my mind. Key stakeholder. It had a certain ring to it. The expansive windows on the 15th floor of Davidson and Associates offered a panoramic view of the city. A city Marcus, my son, had conquered. A city I had helped him conquer. I watched him from the quiet corner of the office, a silent observer in the glass-walled meeting room. He gestured with his hands, his voice a confident baritone echoing slightly in the space. "We need to be aggressive on this. Julian," he said, addressing Sarah's soon-to-be husband. "This is the opportunity we've been waiting for." Julian nodded, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "I agree, but we need to be cautious. The market is volatile." My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and a strange, unfamiliar sadness. Pride in the man my son had become, sadness at the distance that had grown between us. He was a force, a leader, but he had built this empire, in part, with my money, a secret I had kept close to my chest. Marcus had always been ambitious, even as a child. He dreamt big, talked of changing the world, of leaving his mark, and I, like any mother, wanted to support those dreams. When he'd first pitched his business idea, a fresh-faced graduate brimming with enthusiasm, I'd seen the spark in his eyes. "Mom, this is it," he'd told me, the business plan clutched in his hand. "This is how I'm going to make a difference." But the banks hadn't shared his vision. They'd seen a young, inexperienced entrepreneur, a risky investment. He'd been devastated, his initial excitement replaced with a quiet dejection I hated to see. So I'd stepped in. I'd liquidated a portion of my inheritance, a nest egg I'd planned to use for my own future. "I believe in you, Marcus," I'd said, handing him the check. "This is for you, for your dreams." He'd been ecstatic, hugging me tightly, promising to pay me back tenfold. "You won't regret this, Mom," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion, and I hadn't regretted it. Not really, seeing his success, watching him build something from the ground up, had filled me with a sense of quiet satisfaction, until Sarah had entered the picture. Sarah was lovely, intelligent, ambitious in her own right, but she had a way of subtly diminishing my presence in Marcus's life. Little comments, small gestures, all designed to create a distance between us. Marcus is so independent, June," she'd said once, a tight smile on her lips. "He doesn't need you to hover over him anymore." Then had come the conversation that had shattered me. "Mom," Marcus had said, his voice gentle yet firm, echoing the same sentiment. "We love you, but your constant involvement is suffocating us. We need some space." Suffocating. The word had stung. A sharp slap across the face. I had retreated, wounded, questioning everything I'd ever done as a mother. Had I been too involved? Had I stifled his growth, his independence? The meeting continued, the low hum of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. I watched as Marcus presented his ideas with clarity and passion, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. He was a natural leader, and I felt a pang of maternal pride, even amidst the lingering hurt. It was then that a tall, impeccably dressed man entered the room. He excused himself for the interruption, addressing Marcus directly. "Mr. Patterson," he said, his voice smooth and professional, "I'm Robert Caldwell, a senior partner here. There's a matter I need to discuss with you privately, regarding a significant investment in the firm." Marcus looked surprised, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "An investment?" he asked, glancing at Julian, who shrugged in response. Caldwell nodded, his gaze shifting to me for a brief moment, a knowing look in his eyes. "Yes," he said, turning back to Marcus. "A substantial investment made by Mrs. June Patterson." The blood drained from Marcus's face. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, a mixture of shock and disbelief etched on his features. The silence in the room was thick, heavy, the air suddenly charged with an unspoken tension. I met his gaze, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. The city spread out before me, a tapestry of steel and glass, a testament to my son's ambition and my silent power. I hadn't sought revenge, not in the traditional sense, but I had reclaimed something far more valuable, my sense of self, my worth, my quiet, undeniable power. The game, it seemed, had just begun. The elevator doors slid open onto the 15th floor of Davidson and Associates, and a wave of cool, conditioned air washed over me. I smoothed down my skirt, feeling a tremor of nerves, but also a strange sense of calm. This building, this floor, this very air, it all belonged to Marcus, or so he thought. "Ms. Patterson, June Patterson," a crisp, professional voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to see a woman, impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, extending a hand. "I'm Rachel Davidson." We spoke on the phone. I shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip. "Yes, of course. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Miss Davidson." Rachel smiled warmly. "The pleasure is all mine. Please call me Rachel. And please come this way." She led me down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices, each buzzing with activity. I glimpsed young professionals hunched over computers, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens. I recognized the focused intensity, the drive to succeed. It reminded me of Marcus, of his late-night studying, his relentless pursuit of his goals. "We've prepared a conference room for us," Rachel said, gesturing towards a door at the end of the hallway. "It's a bit more private." "Thank you," I replied, my heart beating a little faster. I wondered what this was all about. Rachel had been vague on the phone, simply saying she wanted to discuss my investment portfolio with the firm. I had been a silent investor in Marcus's company for years, funneling money through various channels, ensuring he had the resources he needed to grow his business. He had no idea, of course. He thought his success was solely his own. Inside the conference room, a young man was already waiting. He introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, a junior associate at the firm. He quickly set about pouring coffee for us, his movements efficient and practiced. "So, Ms. Patterson," Rachel began once we were settled, "we've been reviewing your investment portfolio, and frankly, we're quite impressed." I nodded politely, trying to appear nonchalant. "You have a keen eye for opportunity," she continued, "and a remarkable understanding of the market." Mr. Henderson chimed in. "Your initial investment in TechSpark, for instance, has yielded extraordinary returns." TechSpark, that was Marcus's company, the one he'd built from the ground up, the one he'd proudly claimed was his own. "Yes," I said calmly, taking a sip of my coffee. "I've always believed in supporting innovative ventures, and your belief has paid off handsomely," Rachel said, a gleam in her eye. "In fact, your stake in TechSpark now represents a significant portion of the company's overall valuation." I allowed a small smile to play on my lips. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when my silent support, my years of unseen sacrifice, would finally be acknowledged, not by Marcus, perhaps, but by someone who understood the true scope of my contribution. "We've been following TechSpark's progress closely," Rachel continued, "and we believe it has immense potential for further growth. We're particularly interested in your perspective on their future direction." "My perspective?" I asked, feigning surprise. "But I'm just a passive investor. With all due respect, Ms. Patterson," Rachel said, leaning forward, "your investment is anything but passive. You hold a substantial stake in this company, a stake that gives you considerable influence." Mr. Henderson nodded in agreement. "We believe your insights would be invaluable as we consider our own investment strategy." My heart swelled with a sense of vindication. After years of being dismissed, of being told I was overinvolved, I was finally being recognized for my contributions, not as Marcus's mother, but as a shrewd investor, a force to be reckoned with. "Well," I said, a quiet confidence blooming in my voice, "I do have a few thoughts on the matter." And as I began to speak, outlining my vision for TechSpark's future, I felt a surge of power, a sense of ownership that had been dormant for far too long. Rachel and Mr. Henderson listened intently, their expressions a mixture of respect and awe. I spoke about market trends, about emerging technologies, about the untapped potential I saw within TechSpark. I spoke with the authority of someone who had not only nurtured the company's growth but also held the keys to its future. "Ms. Patterson," Rachel said finally, her voice filled with admiration, "your insights are truly remarkable. You clearly have a deep understanding of this business." "Thank you," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "It's been a passion project of mine for quite some time." Mr. Henderson added, "We'd be honored to have you join our advisory board. Your guidance would be invaluable as we navigate the complexities of this industry." I paused, considering the offer. It was more than I had hoped for, a seat at the table, a chance to shape the future of not just TechSpark, but the entire industry. I'll need some time to think it over, I said, even though I already knew my answer. Of course, Rachel said. Please take all the time you need. We'll be in touch. As I left the conference room, I felt a lightness in my step, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I glanced back at the glass-walled offices, at the bustling activity within. This was my legacy. This was my revenge. Not a vengeful act of malice, but a quiet assertion of power, a reclamation of my own worth. And it was all thanks to the silent investment, the secret weapon I had wielded without Marcus ever knowing. I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind me, and a small, satisfied smile played on my lips. What would Marcus say when he found out? Rachel Davidson's office was bathed in the warm afternoon sun. Sunlight glinted off the sleek, modern furniture, and the cityscape spread out beyond the panoramic windows. She gestured to one of the plush chairs opposite her large, polished desk. "Please, Mrs. Patterson, have a seat." I settled in, my hands folded in my lap. "Thank you for making time to see me," I said. Rachel smiled, a professional, welcoming smile. "It's my pleasure," she replied. "I wanted to speak with you personally about your investment in Patterson Technologies." My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment of truth. "Investment?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Although I knew exactly what she meant, I needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear her acknowledge my contribution, not just to the company, but to Marcus's very success. "Yes," Rachel continued, her voice softening slightly. "We've been reviewing our investor portfolio, and well, we were quite surprised by the extent of your holdings." She paused, shuffling a few papers on her desk. "Frankly, Mrs. Patterson, you're one of our largest silent investors. Your initial seed funding was instrumental in getting Patterson Technologies off the ground." I allowed a small, knowing smile to play on my lips. "Is that so?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "I suppose Marcus hasn't told you the full story of how his company came to be. My son, who had so casually dismissed my presence in his life, claiming I was suffocating him, had built his entire empire on my money, on my silent support, on the inheritance I'd carefully invested, hoping to secure his future. He'd never known. He'd simply assumed it was his brilliance, his hard work alone that had brought him this success." Rachel leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "He hasn't, actually," she admitted. "We were under the impression, well, let's just say we weren't aware of your significant role. This level of investment," she tapped a finger on the papers, "warrants a seat on the board. We would be honored, Mrs. Patterson, if you would consider joining us." My breath hitched. A seat on the board, in Marcus's company, the company he believed was entirely his own, the company he had built, brick by brick, without my interference. The irony was almost too delicious. "I'm flattered by the offer, Miss Davidson," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "It's certainly something to consider." I wanted to savor this moment, to draw it out, to let the realization of my power, my influence, sink in. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming my worth, about reminding myself and perhaps reminding Marcus that I was more than just a suffocating mother. I was the silent architect of his success. "Please, call me Rachel," she said, extending her hand across the desk. "I understand this is a lot to take in, but I want you to know we truly value your investment and your insight. We believe you could be a valuable asset to Patterson Technologies." I took her hand, my grip firm. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "I appreciate your candor." I paused, a small smile playing on my lips. "I'll give your offer some serious thought. And perhaps," I added, my eyes twinkling, "I'll have a conversation with my son as well." The thought of Marcus's face when he learned the truth, when he understood the extent of my contribution to his precious company, sent a thrill of satisfaction through me. He had dismissed me, pushed me away, and now I held the key to his kingdom. He wanted distance. He wanted independence. I would give it to him, but on my terms. "Please, take your time, Mrs. Patterson," Rachel assured me as I rose to leave. "There's no rush, but I do hope you'll consider it. We're very excited about the prospect of having you on board." "Thank you, Rachel," I repeated, my voice filled with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in a long time. As I walked out of her office, the cityscape spread out before me, no longer a symbol of Marcus's accomplishments, but a reflection of my own. The sun felt warmer on my skin, the air lighter in my lungs. I hadn't plotted this revenge, but the payoff was sweeter than I could have imagined, and I had a feeling this was just the beginning.